basis?
No, at the present time, what we produce we use on our own air. We do have different producers work within the global facility to produce programs to go elsewhere.
Now, referring to local production, that involves Canadian content. I'd like to know your opinion on how Canadian content is giving Canadian television its own identity.
Well, I think just by percentages it probably is. Certainly we believe that Canadian broadcasting should have its own identity. The problem facing not only global but every private broadcaster in Canada is how to keep that Canadian content there on an affordable basis. For every $3.14 that Global has spent in Canadian programming, we've got $1 in revenue. And that just can't go on. It's just like living at home. If you're spending more than you're making, pretty soon you're into financial trouble. So I think the major challenge for us and all broadcasters is to find a way of doing quality Canadian programming, meeting the basic philosophy that a Canadian broadcasting system should be basically Canadian in nature, and yet do it on a basis that we can all afford.
Don, I'd like to ask you the same. How is Canadian content giving Canadian television its own identity with reference to, Canadian talent exposure, changing its image? Is it good or is it bad?
I'm one that believes that we're North American in identity, and I don't want anybody to think that I'm not a Canadian. First and foremost, I am, but I do have trouble as a person. For example, when I go into the city of Buffalo to a hockey game, and I sit there with 16,000 other people, I look around me, and I could be in Maple Leaf Gardens in Toronto. People are people.
Yeah, but there is a different image.
Well, some people think there should be a different image, and I'm still asking the question, what is this difference that they're asking for? Whoever the nebulas they are. Canadian identity.
What image would you like to see?
If you mean producing programs that are Canadian in identity by employing Canadian performers, yeah, fine.
Well, what image would you like to see of Canada projected through its television and its electronic media?
I'd like to see Canada a mirror of Canada, and I think we do that in those programs that are produced. Pardon?
What would you like this mirror to reflect about Canada?
Well, I think it has to... Are you talking about entertainment?
Television,
public affairs,
electronic media, the image that it puts forth.
I think it has to be something other than big city Toronto. I'll be very honest when I say that. I think much of our Canadian production comes out of the city of Toronto, and if you're sitting in Nowheresville, Alberta, you may not feel that you're part of that whole thing.
Was Canadian content, and the regulations, was it necessary?
Were Canadian content regulations necessary? I suppose, although I think regulations themselves are bad, because I think that, you're telling people, I don't care, what sphere we're talking about, regulations per se are bad, because then somebody says, well, we get into percentages, which it's the type of thing we're into with television, where 60% of your broadcast day must be Canadian, 50% in prime time between 6 p.m. and midnight must be Canadian. I think that there has to be some other kind of yardstick. I would rather see our company, for example, spending most of its production dollars to produce good prime-time shows that are Canadian than taking those same production dollars and trying to stretch them across a broadcast day and not giving, a dollar's worth of good television because we're trying to stretch a dollar too far.
You have a quantity quota to meet, which tends to spread the dollars far to match the volume. What we're talking about is an interesting quality, and because you're forced to meet a quota, the dollars have to spread out to fit the quota. And if you could concentrate on a few areas, certain areas, I think the quality standard would go up, and probably the Canadian viewers would be better served. There is no magic in a Canadian program to the Canadian viewer. They want to see what they want to see.
Do you find yourself sort of in a pinch and almost producing rip-off type programs just to meet the quotas?
I don't think there's any such thing as a rip-off program. I think that all broadcasters are conscientiously trying to do the best they can with the resources.
Well, okay, perhaps not to your audience, but to yourself. Do you feel you're cheating yourself by not being able to put the maximum in?
There are times when that the restriction on available capital forces you to compromise what might otherwise be a higher standard. In our own situation at Global, the drastic sort of financial situation which we went through forced everybody to temper their sights for the moment. We haven't really lost any of the ambitions that we originally undertook. It's just not hasn't been attainable in the time thus far.
Do you find yourself making more compromises than you would like to?
Not anymore. Not anymore. I think in the early financially difficult days of Global, we had to make a lot of compromises that nobody liked. And I think we've probably turned a major corner now, and that we're now able to expand our horizons and fulfill our ambitions the way we are all originally intended.
Both Global and CKCO are in a network position, and from one originating center, how do you effectively cover your broadcast area? Don?
Well, of course, we're not in quite the same position as the Global network.
Was it a matter of semantics, or?
Global is in a position where they, again, have a series of transmitters in which they serve the province of Ontario. In our situation, our studios are located in Kitchener-Waterloo, and we have a series of repeaters which allow us to cover a geographic area in Western Ontario. I suppose that by nature, yes, we have been given licenses to serve those geographic areas, and so with that thought in mind, we, in news production, et cetera, must attempt to reflect and show that geographic area.
Are you doing it effectively?
I don't know. I think that it's very difficult some days to sit there and really know what your audience wants. You know, do they prefer to watch a local hostess do a television show, or do they prefer to watch Dinah Shore?
Well, that's for you to determine.
Yeah, well, those are the questions you ask, yes. And as you look at the rating books, it's the old story, you know. If there's name value to the performer, people will tend to spend time with that performer. It's very difficult to mount truly local shows.
Well,
and generate audience.
Have either of you made any effort to localize anything but news?
Oh yes, certainly. We have a
what type of programming?
We have a daily half-hour format with our ladies director each day of the week. We do a local church service every Sunday. We do a local children's show involving children from our viewing area who have an opportunity of showing what kind of talent they possess, whether they tap dance or play the piano or whatever. We're constantly doing this kind of programming. And you have to. I mean, you're licensed to serve the community.
Well, your coverage also has to deal with cable. That's quite a concern. I'd like to know how you feel cable is affecting private broadcasting in Canada. I'll ask Wayne that first.
The one difficulty that we all face is that cable also extends the capability of viewers receiving American networks much deeper into parts of the province than they might otherwise be able to get.
Right. That's what I'd like to know, is how is it affecting private broadcasting in Canada as such?
Well, I think as a broad topic, it's pretty hard to say. I think if you want to isolate markets, take Alberta, where they recently got cable in, and the viewers in Calgary and Edmonton in particular are able to receive signals from Spokane. It's had quite a direct and serious effect on the local broadcasters who, for a large period of time, have had more or less a captive audience. But now they are facing the competitive bite from the availability of American signals. Our introduction into the cable process and into broadcasting in southern Ontario is no different in that broadcasters here have always had to compete with the American signals. So we are into that same kind of a battle.
Don, has cable presented any problems for you?
Yeah, cable's a Jekyll and Hyde. You know, it extends your signal perhaps into areas that might not normally get your signal, and at the same time it's bringing signals into your coverage area that might not normally be there if there wasn't the cable facility. So yeah, you know, if you think of the coverage area as a large piece of pie, and at one time that pie was cut into 3 pieces.
With the Buffalo stations in particular, has that affected CKCO?
Not, well, yeah, sure, the competition has always been there, as Wayne suggested. Here in Southern Ontario, we've always been exposed to the Buffalo market.
Right. I'm referring particularly to the action taken lately, the idea of them wanting to jam their signals coming up here because of cut-ins.
Well, of course, that has nothing to do with broadcasters, basically. That's a cable situation.
Doesn't it affect you in any way?
What, the fact that Buffalo wants to jam